Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Monday, and we are doing breaches of the week. Obviously, I missed yesterday, and just too much of a crazy day with holidays going on and everything else. So here we are on Monday, and I have a ton of people to thank. This might be my longest video ever. There is so much breaches just for the last week or so, and just going on in general, but thank you to Richard Reefer, Ronald Ash, Jen Viaumaster, Duke Ironstone, David Walker, Jason Dance, Jacqueline Wolf, Chris Fallon, and Dr. Christopher Gay. Guys, thank you so much. Again, crazy week. If you have a tip for me, please send it my way. And with that, let's dive right in and talk about Compucon. This is an update. These are the guys, the IT outfit that's owned by Home Depot. Not Home Depot, excuse me, Office Depot and Office Max, and they have companies as clients like Citibank, Home Depot, Wells Fargo, Target, Trust Bank, Lowe's, etc. They were hit with ransomware earlier this year, and now we know the bill basically for the damages here. And to quote, the company estimates the loss of revenue to be between 5 and 8 million as a result of the incident, primarily because of Compucon's need to temporarily suspend certain services to certain customers. In addition, the company expects to incur expenses of up to $20 million, of which the company assumes approximately 10 million will be accrued through the first quarter of 2021. The cost of a data breach, much more than simply having good security posture out of the gate. Let that be a lesson to all. Moving on. Let's head on over to India to a company called Ubiquiti. As much as 8.2 terabytes of personal information and data has allegedly leaked from users from Ubiquiti's mobile payment wallet application and onto the dark web, according to a report from India Times. Now, basically, a researcher who highlighted the breach called it, quote, probably the largest KYC data leak in history. Now, the leak apparently includes ID scans, passports, emails, phone numbers, addresses, and is currently on sale on various dark web forums for 1.5 Bitcoin, which I believe is around $30,000 or so. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could never keep up with the price of that thing. It's obviously a huge problem. And moving on, let's talk about both the University of Maryland and the University of California. On March 29th, threat actors began publishing screenshots of data allegedly stolen from both of these institutions. Now, the screenshots, including records that allegedly belong to the University of Maryland at Baltimore, show federal tax documents, requests for tuition, remission paperwork, applications for the Board of Nursing, passports, tax summary documents. The leaked data also included snapshots of exposed sensitive information, such as photos and names of individuals, home addresses, social security, immigration status, dates of birth, passport numbers, and on and on and on. The University of California also appears, as I mentioned, to be the subject of the same attackers, and screenshots published by them include individuals and their social security numbers, retirement documentation, and 2019-2020 benefit adjustment requests. In addition, the leaked data appears to have included late enrollment benefit application forms for employees at the UC Path Blue Shield Health Savings enrollment. So heads up, if you have anything to do with University of Maryland or University of California. Moving on, let's give you guys an update on SolarWinds. You remember that massive breach that happened in December of last year that is still unraveling. Current and former administration sources are saying that basically state-sponsored attackers were able to read the Department of Homeland Security Secretary's emails, among others as well. Now, the cyber attackers compromised the heart of the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, under obviously former President Trump and other top-ranking members of the department's cybersecurity staff, according to a report. The Associated Press reported that as part of the federal government infiltration, the attackers were able to access the email accounts of then acting secretary for DHS Chad Wolf, as well as his staff, and that is according to anonymous government sources. In the wake of this discovery of this just massive operation, DHS officials, including Mr. Wolf, switched to using new mobile phones with Signal, that's the encrypted messaging app, to communicate, and that's again according to officials talking to the Associated Press. DHS spokesperson Sarah Peck told the outlet that, quote, a small number of employees' accounts were targeted in the breach and that the agency, quote, no longer sees indicators of compromise on our networks. Obviously a very good thing. It's unclear whether the information in the emails was of classified nature or what it was. We also now know, according to other reporting, that both the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the DOE, Department of Energy, were also affected. One source, an administration official under the Trump administration, also confirmed that basically the FAA was one of the agencies that was hit. This is just coming to light. The person noted that the FAA struggles with outdated and legacy software, and basically it didn't know for weeks how many servers were actually running the SolarWinds software. So obviously the FAA, that's a huge thing. They also control air traffic, so that's a huge, huge problem. Meanwhile, the Department of Energy, according to the AP, basically they had an investigation that revealed that the adversaries were able to access top official schedules, including then Secretary Dan Brule. And basically it should be noted that schedules are not confidential. However, a DoD spokesperson said that, quote, it has found no evidence the network that maintains senior official schedules was compromised. So we'll see. They may not even know. Again, we're talking about the government. They tend to be behind. Moving on, let's talk about Broward County Public Schools. Apparently, attackers breached the Broward County Public School system in Florida, their computer systems, earlier this month, and threatened to release sensitive information, including students' and teachers' personal data, unless the district paid them $40 million. That is a massive ransom for a school district, even Broward County, which is a larger county in Florida. You hear about them all the time in presidential elections because they help to swing Florida one way or the other, but that is a huge, huge problem. Moving on, let's talk about the Egregor ransomware gang. I've talked about them before as they have locked up quite a few companies for ransom. And here's the thing. I think crime might pay in the short term if you're listening, kids, but in the long term, you get caught, and here's why. Because the alleged members of the Egregor ransomware cartel have been arrested. 3 alleged members of this group were apprehended in Ukraine in a crackdown conducted by both French and Ukrainian authorities last month. The arrests were also made possible with the help of private sector partnerships, from antivirus and cybersecurity researchers and on and on and on. Now, French law enforcement initiated the investigation on Egregor's operations after they basically launched attacks on several French-based companies for things like logistics, newspaper publications, and video game development. The 3 suspects were arrested after French authorities had tracked them down with the help of Ukrainian authorities. And the names and exact designations of the arrestees have not yet been released. Now, in an email interview with The Record about the incident, Francois B., the head of computer security incident response team for the French judicial police, cited partnerships with cybersecurity and incident response companies, including outfits like Trend Micro and others. He noted that these organizations helped in active investigations as they, quote, provide us with the most accurate information on ongoing cases, tools, or threat intelligence data. We are all in this together. I'm glad to see another ransomware gang taken down. NetWalker was recent too. Moving on. Let's go with Microsoft here and talk about the Exchange server hacking update. Basically, this is the government agency edition here because the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, you may know they were formerly headed by Chris Krebs, who has basically been making waves since the election. The CISA has ordered all federal agencies to scan their networks again for any signs of compromised on-premise Microsoft Exchange servers and report their findings within 5 days. Now, the CISA issued another directive ordering federal agencies to urgently update or disconnect their on-premise Exchange servers after Microsoft released security updates for these these zero-day vulnerabilities that are basically collectively known as proxy logon. Now, earlier in March, the CISA basically said that so far no U.S. federal agencies were compromised in these Exchange server attacks, but obviously here we are. The newly issued emergency directive provides federal civilian executive branch agencies with additional forensic triage and server hardening requirements as well. To quote, specifically, this update directs federal departments and agencies to run newly developed tools, Microsoft's test proxy logon script and safety scanner MCERT to investigate whether their Microsoft Exchange servers have been compromised. That's according to the CISA. The CISA also asked agencies that find any evidence of compromise using these tools to immediately report it as an incident to them. This emergency directive also requires all agencies further harden their on-premise email Exchange servers by Monday, June 28th, 2021 at noon Eastern Standard Time. So there you go. Now, required hardening measures include things like provisioning new or more advanced firewalls, installing updates within 48 hours after they've been released, only using supported software versions, configuring logging and storing logs off-site for at least 6 months, and installing anti-malware on all premise servers. It's good advice for anybody. There you go. Moving on, let's talk about Excelion. I'm going to give you an update again. As you know, this is ever ongoing. And the latest one to declare is Stanford Medicine. Basically, they're claiming what got hit was social security numbers, addresses, emails, family member, and financial information. And basically, this is obviously a huge problem for them. So heads up if you have anything to do with Stanford Medicine. Moving on, let's talk about J&B Importers. I believe they import bicycles from what I was reading. They were the victim of a ransomware attack this past Thursday, which shut down their global wholesale distributor website. A representative at JBI told Brain, which I'm assuming is a reporting outlet, none of its customers' business information was affected because that information was stored off-site. So hopefully J&B Importers will get back on their feet. Moving on, let's head on up to Canada and talk about Canadian retailer Home Hardware. I believe this is the Canadian version of Home Depot. They got hit with ransomware. I don't think they're related to Home Depot, but that's the version of that. And to quote, an unauthorized third party was able to access parts of our corporate data. That's according to their spokesperson. We immediately engaged our cybersecurity firm and quickly implemented countermeasures to isolate and contain the attack. We have maintained full business continuity. Each of these stores are independently owned and operated. Based on our investigation, it appears that the attack has not impacted dealer retail systems or any consumer transaction or payment data. Hopefully that's true because there are over 1,000 stores in Canada, so we'll see what happens. Moving on, let's talk about Facebook again, because quite frankly, they have no idea how to secure their stuff and they're always in breaches. Apparently, a user in a low-level hacking forum this past Saturday published the phone numbers and personal data of over 533 million Facebook users, and they did this for free. Now, we're talking about users from 106 different countries, including 32 million records on users in the US, 11 million records, in the UK, 6 million in India, and we're talking about phone numbers, Facebook IDs, full names, locations, birth dates, bios, and in some cases, email addresses. I've also read reports that Mark Zuckerberg's information was doxed as well. Now, Business Insider, basically, where I'm cribbing this one from, reviewed a sample of the leaked data and verified several records by matching known Facebook user phone numbers with IDs and on, so they know it's legitimate. Now, a Facebook spokesperson told Insider that the data had actually been scraped because of a vulnerability that the company had fixed in 2019. This is not the first time that Facebook has had lots of users' phone numbers and passwords and all that kind of stuff exposed online. They discovered this vulnerability in 2019. And at that time allowed millions of phone numbers to be scraped from Facebook servers in violation of its terms of services. That they said that was basically fixed in August of 2019. Obviously, they basically vowed to crack down on things like data scraping since Cambridge Analytica hit, and we found that about that in 2018. They got 80 million users in violation of terms and services. Then there was all the political ad stuff and on and on and on. Those are just a few examples. I did an entire video on this in 2019. I literally went back and looked at it. It's called "It's Time to Put Mark Zuckerberg in Jail," and so this will not be the last violation of our privacy we see coming from Facebook, whether it's a new or previous breach. Moving on, let's talk about emissions testing company A+ or App+ Technologies. On Tuesday, March 30th, a malware cyber attack on this company prevented vehicle inspections in 8 states. You have to drive your older vehicle and get the emissions tested. These are the guys that do it. And basically, the states are Connecticut, Georgia, Idaho, Illinois, Massachusetts, Utah, and Wisconsin. Now, as of 2 days ago, A+ or App+ Technologies cannot provide a time frame for restoration and remediation, as the state governments require them to go through rigorous mitigation and testing processes and on and on and on. So we'll see what happens. But heads up, if your car is due for emissions in one of those states, you might be out of luck for a while. Moving on, let's talk about a Steelflash. This is a leading French electronics manufacturing company. They suffered a cyber attack by the Revil ransomware gang, and they are demanding $24 million. Is it me, or do these ransoms seem to be going up and up and up? Now, a Steelflash is a world-leading French electronics manufacturing EMS company that specializes in design, engineering, and printing of printed circuit boards. And while they have not publicly disclosed this attack, Bleeping Computer, basically somebody alerted them, found a sample of the Revilware ransomware that allowed them to basically access the leak page and see it. So we know that they've been hit. So obviously that's a huge, huge problem. And here we are. But if you have anything to do with a Steelflash from France, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about Booking.com. This is a major hotel booking site, and this is an update because they've been fined 475,000 euros or 558,000 US after failing to report a serious data breach within the time period mandated by the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. Booking.com suffered the breach back in 2018, and basically 40 employees at various hotels in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, were scammed basically by exploiting Booking.com. They didn't disclose, and here we are. Again, it is cheaper to secure than it is to pay a fine or a ransom. Moving on. Let's actually give you an update on Capital One, the massive financial institution here in the United States. Basically, the day this breach was disclosed a couple of years ago at this point, the Department of Justice arrested and indicted the suspected attacker, a former Amazon Web Services employee, Paige Thompson. I actually talked about this. I remember this one, who posted about stealing the data on GitHub after infiltrating Capital One's AWS, or Amazon Web Services, cloud infrastructure. Now, Thompson allegedly stole over 100 million people's personal information. We're talking names, email addresses, dates of birth, transaction data, credit scores, payment histories, balances, and even linked accounts and social security numbers for some. She also gained access to roughly 140,000 social security numbers and about 80,000 linked bank accounts, and here we are. Now, while the breach notification, and this is where we come in today, the breach notification letters back then might have seemed out of place 2 years after the incident because they just sent a new round, they were prompted by apparently new findings while analyzing data stolen in the 2019 breach. However, after they reanalyzed the data, they found that more social security numbers were compromised, and therefore they sent out another round. We'll see where that goes. If you get a notice, heads up, your Social Security has been out there for at least 2 years, although it's probably been out there for a lot longer, because if you have a Capital One account, you probably have an account with Equifax, whether you like it or not. Moving on, let's talk about Ubiquiti Networks. This is one of the big ones from this past week. They're a vendor of cloud-enabled Internet Things devices like routers, network switches, video recorders, wireless access points, all that kind of stuff. On January 11th, Ubiquiti closed that they had a breach involving a third-party cloud provider that had exposed account credentials. But now, a source who participated in that response alleges that Ubiquiti, when talking to Krebs on security, massively downplayed the basically a quote-unquote catastrophic incident to minimize the hit to their stock price, and that third-party provider claim was a fabrication, meaning there was no third party. They got hit. Now, a security professional at Ubiquiti who helped the company respond to this 2-month breach beginning in December of 2020 contacted Krebs on Security, which is where I'm getting all of this from, after raising concerns that basically Ubiquiti's whistleblower hotline with the European Data Protection, raising his concerns with Krebs on Security, but also calling the European Data Protection hotlines. Excuse me, I can't even read my own notes. Now, the source, who is called Adam by this reporting by Brian Krebs, spoke on the condition of anonymity for fear of retribution for obvious reasons. And he said, and I quote, "It was catastrophically worse than reported, and legal silence and overruled efforts to decisively protect customers. The breach was massive. Customer data was at risk. Access to customer devices deployed in corporations at homes around the world was at risk." Now, according to Adam, basically the attackers obtained full read-write access to Ubiquiti's databases on Amazon Web Services, which was the alleged third party involved in the data breach, meaning the alleged third party was Amazon. That's not how that works, and they know it. Now, Ubiquiti's breach disclosure, he wrote, quote, "was downplayed and purposely written to imply that a third-party cloud vendor was at risk and that Ubiquiti was merely a casualty of that instead of the target." And I think that's a very important distinction to make, and so that's obviously a huge thing. Now, in their January 11th public notice, Ubiquiti said that it became aware of, quote, "unauthorized access to certain of our information technology systems hosted by a third-party cloud provider," although it declined to name the third party. In reality, Adam said, the attackers gained administrative access to Ubiquiti servers at Amazon's cloud service, which secures the underlying server hardware and software, but requires the cloud tenant, aka the client, to secure the access to any data stored there. And that's basically how that works. They're going to give you the space. How you secure it is on you. And so he said they were able to get cryptographic secrets for single sign-on cookies, remote access, full source code control content, and signing keys exfiltration. That's obviously very, very deep. They basically could hit all the Amazon S3 buckets. I mean, it was a huge, huge problem. And essentially, they are really seriously underplaying this here. And so that's a huge problem. Ubiquiti is basically denying this. They responded on March 31st in a post to its user forum. Ubiquiti said its current experts identified, quote, no evidence that customer information was accessed or even targeted. Now, Ubiquiti can say this, says Adam, because it failed to keep records of which accounts were accessing the data. I'm thinking we'll hear more about this, in the future as well, due to responses. But, I've seen Ubiquiti wireless access points, for example. Their logging is basically non-existent. If you're trying to connect that to a live monitoring solution, the last place you'd want to do is go buy a Ubiquiti wireless access point. That's not to say they're bad for other things, but in terms of their depth of logging and their enterprise level capability, they're just not there. So we'll see where that happens, but there are millions and millions of people that use Ubiquiti because they're inexpensive and they're entry-level business class, and so that's going to be a huge problem. We'll go from there. Moving on. Let's talk about one of the largest, London school systems. This is the Harris Federation, and they just got attacked recently by ransomware. Now, the cyber attack shut down their IT systems, email services, telephone lines at primary and secondary academies everywhere in London, England. Now, after knowing about this attack, the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre published an alert about increased computer attacks on schools in the British countryside. However, according to cybersecurity analysts, this attack was a disruptive cyber attack on a chain of schools in London and the southeast. About 37,000 pupils are incapable of accessing email, and so hopefully they'll get back online soon. Moving on, let's talk about the Ellsworth County Rural Water District. You might recall someone messed with the municipal water supply in Florida about a month ago or so and added lye to the water supply, and hopefully, or rather, that was caught immediately because an employee just happened to see it go down live, and so they were able to undo that. But now we have a new one from Kansas, and here's what's going on. The United States Department of Justice this week announced official charges against a Kansas man for accessing and tampering with the public water system. This person, Wyatt A. Travenchek, he's 22 years old, of Ellsworth County, Kansas, is accused of accessing the computer system of the Ellsworth County Rural Water District without authorization. This intrusion took place on March 27 of 2019, according to the DOJ. And once he gained access to the protected computer systems, he then allegedly performed specific actions that resulted in it shutting down its processes that affected the facility's cleaning and disinfecting procedures. These actions, this indictment claims, were intended to harm the Ellsworth Rural District Number 1, which is also referred to as Post Rock Rural Water District as well. Travanik, who worked for the Rural Water District for roughly a year, had been tasked to remotely access this computer system for monitoring the plant, and here we go. If found guilty, he faces up to 20 years in federal prison for tampering with a public water system and 5 years, additionally, in federal prison for reckless damage to a protected computer during unauthorized access, and fines up to $500,000. So if you're really pissed at your old boss, don't do it. Moving on. Let's talk about the Australian TV station Channel 9. A cyber attack believed to have been a ransomware infection hit Channel 9 in Australia over this past weekend and prevented the network from airing some of its normal shows. The Sydney Morning Herald, a newspaper owned by Nine Entertainment, which is Channel 9's parent company, said that the cyber attack impacted the TV's broadcast and corporate networks. The incident completely shut down Channel 9's Sydney studio, basically leaving the TV station unable to air its Sunday morning news programming, Weekend Today, which runs usually from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's a pretty long show. So heads up, operations were switched to their Melbourne studio and normal broadcasting resumed around 6 p.m., but they obviously missed almost an entire day, of programming. So heads up to you if you were wondering what happened at Channel 9 in Australia. Moving on, let's talk about Angermunde in Germany. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's my stab at it. The city administration in Angermunde, or Angermund, however you pronounce that, was initially closed for all administrative services until April 7th of 2021 because basically they got hit. This is simply what it is. They attacked an attacker, basically damaged an entire IT system of the administration. I'm taking this from a German news source, so bear with me on the translate here. All administrative staff can basically not be reached via email until then, and appointments cannot be currently arranged either. In addition to email systems being hit, the telephone systems of all branch offices were affected, and the administrative part in cities I am not even going to try to pronounce here, but around Angermunde, I'm going to imagine, were also down as well. And so you can basically get to the municipal after-school care centers using mobile phone numbers that were outside of that system, but pretty much everything else is down, and that's obviously a huge problem. And so hopefully they'll get back online after what appears to be a massive cyber attack, and we are not done with Germany, because Evangelical Hospital in Lippstadt, Germany was attacked, and this was apparently detected on March 30th, and they shut down their systems to prevent further damage. Only severe emergencies and mothers who are expecting their children are to be admitted at the hospital. Everybody else had to go to another hospital or contact the respective secretariat in the EVK to reschedule. In Germans, you probably know what that means. Affected patients are asked to contact the responsible secretariats by telephone, basically starting now. Emergency patients with life-threatening illnesses will continue to receive first aid in this hospital's emergency room and then transferred to a fully functioning hospital, and on and on. This is not the first time we've seen a hospital getting hit. In the last couple of months, we've seen 3 French hospitals hit, so hopefully Evangelical Hospital in Lippstadt, Germany will get back on their feet. Moving on, let's talk about the New York Foundling Organization, which provides many services related to child protection, foster care and adoption, disability services, and more. An unsecured database sitting in a Microsoft blob appears to belong to basically them, and this unsecured database contained more than 2,000 comma-separated value, or CSV, and text files, each with hundreds or thousands of entries related to patients' medical records, children's legal guardians, caseworkers, doctors, and other child welfare specialists. And as of March 31st, the New York Foundling Organization has not actually confirmed that they have a data breach. So heads up, hopefully that is not them. Hopefully that will go away and be secure, but here we are. Moving on. Let's talk about Wieden and Kennedy, or Wieden plus Kennedy. They're a ad agency out of Portland. Now, W&K basically gave their employee benefits information to the Portland-based accounting firm Perkins & Co., which in turn then stored that data on servers owned by a vendor called NetGain. Apparently, a ransomware attack hit NetGain, and none of the companies know for certain whether the employee data was compromised in the attack, but here we are. So if you use NetGain or Perkins & Co. or work for Wieden & Kennedy or have anything to do with any of those organizations, heads up, they are still sorting it out. Moving on, let's talk about MedData. They provide revenue cycle services to healthcare systems and hospitals, including Medicaid eligibility, third-party liability, workers' compensation, and patient billing services, obviously all here in the United States. The patient data from multiple providers appears to have been captured and subsequently leaked on an online repository, GitHub Arctic Code Vault, by a third-party vendor, and that would be MedData. And the following hospitals in the last week have declared data breaches thanks to these guys. That would be Memorial Hermann Hospital, King's Daughters Health System, OSF Healthcare, Aspirus, and the University of Chicago Medicine. Heads up, if you use any of those, your data was probably compromised. Moving on, let's talk about PCS Revenue Control Systems, Inc., or PCS. This is another supply chain hit. They work with school districts, and they sent letters to parents stating that the company in December of 2019 detected an unauthorized access to files and records of school meal programs that it manages, according to the statement. Now, PCS said also in their statement that the breach potentially exposed names, identification numbers, dates of birth, and social security numbers. And while PCS said it found no evidence the information was being misused, they always say that, credit monitoring services were provided for the affected families. The company also said it conducted a review of its systems to identify where security could be tightened, but the following school districts are now declaring data breaches. And here we go again. I'm expecting to have an update, as I am with MedData, on this next week. So if you have a student or child in DeKalb County School District in Georgia, Polk County Schools in Florida, Austin ISD in Texas, Alachua County Schools in Florida, and Pelham or Pelham City Schools in Alabama, heads up to you, PCS got you hit. moving on, let's go to our finalies, and this has been a very long video. I think this is the longest breaches video I've done, and we are not done because we've got a couple of these to go. First one we're going to be talking about is the web-connected cameras in your house. And this is what I'm talking about. It's coming from Futurism, and this was really interesting. Attackers in China are basically breaking into unsuspecting victims' home security cameras, recording them doing things like having adult relations and other things, and selling the videos online. It's basically disturbing, but it's unfortunately a common crime, and that's according to the South China Morning Post, and there seems to be a huge online market for these videos. Overall, it reveals just how vulnerable and counterproductive the internet-enabled cameras we keep pointing at ourselves can be. Now, the attackers reportedly tap into tens of thousands of security cameras and have basically found a reliable customer base for things like adult acts, caught on home security, as well as other things, not to mention cyber criminals hiding cameras like this inside hotel rooms, according to SCMP, which is a cybersecurity magazine or publication. They are selling basically home videos, as they're calling them, and set up kind of like a multi-level marketing scheme where their customers are encouraged to keep reselling those videos for even more. Basically, hey, you're going to buy it from me, but why don't you resell it and make more money? The attackers also sell login access to some of the cameras that have been compromised, so you can quite frankly just tune in yourself and record your own videos or do God knows what. And to quote one of the attackers who said this in an interview with SCMP, and I quote, "I have a dozen people traveling around the country to install cameras wherever they go. Even if the hotel finds out, we will lose just a camera, which is a few hundred yuan. We cut a couple of clips to sell online, and we will cover that loss." And strangely enough, some of the most popular videos, including an 8-hour-long recording of a family just hanging out at home, nothing adult themed in that, is one of the most popular ones going around. But that obviously doesn't make it any less invasive or terrifying. And to quote the attacker again, "Such videos are primitive. Many people like such stuff now, like such kind of stuff nowadays. Watching people's privacy and what they're doing at the moment. You know what? I have sold this video several hundred times. It's just a family hanging out, I'm guessing watching Netflix or something, and people apparently want to watch that. So heads up, make sure you have good security controls in your house, multi-factor authentication, keep these things updated, good passwords, all this kind of stuff. Or hey, maybe not put video cameras in your house. That would be another option too. Heads up to you on that. You know my thoughts there. Moving on, we also need to talk about malware and Macs. I am talking to you Macintosh people, you MacBook Pro folks, Mac operating system. I'm not talking about iPhone and Android, although this does apply to you as well in a different vein. And the reason why I'm talking to you MacBook folk is because millions of Macs are getting their owners breached. And this is coming from the cult of Mac, that the publication, I'm assuming many of you know who that is. Cyber criminals reportedly have created more Mac OS malware in 2020 than from 2012 to 2019 combined. That is a massive increase of malware development for MacBooks and Macintosh products, desktops and otherwise. The days when Mac users could happily assume they weren't in danger is long from over. And I disagree with that statement in the sense that you are always in danger. You were just all ignorant about it. And I will get to that because I don't think it's your fault for the most part. But the situation remains worse, obviously, for Windows users because, Windows is the largest target on the planet. But let's talk about 2020 and Mac OS malware. The development of Mac OS went up over 1,000% last year, according to Atlas VPN, who has done the research and homework on this. There were 674,273 new malware samples found in 2020 compared to just 56,556 from the previous year. COVID really helped and so here we are. Now, previously, the highest number in any given year was in 2018 at 92,570. So that is a massive, massive increase. Now, according to this report, and I quote, "Contributing to this record surge in threats is the fact that new malicious software is now easier to engineer now than ever before. Nowadays, hackers do not even need advanced programming skills since they can purchase a ready-made malware code tailored to their needs with a little bit of coding and establish a completely new threat." And that is 100% correct. We get malware all the time to decompile it, play with it, do what we want with it, basically from the research standpoint, but people will buy these things, modify them, and then run terror campaigns. And Mac people, you are not off the radar. Now, basically, this assault continues into 2021. For example, researchers recently found Silver Sparrow, the first malware that targets both Intel-based Macs and the new one, and basically Macs running the new Apple M1 processor, so you can't get around it if you've got the M1. Obviously, the solution for this is antivirus software on your Mac. You need this. You need this like a Windows user does. To be fair, though, as I mentioned, Windows is still the largest computer target because Mac users are a small minority of computer users, and so there were more than 91 million malware samples in 2020 that target Windows as opposed to the almost 700,000 that target Mac, but you do not get off the hook. That basically is just a small year-over-year increase, and malware is continuously expanding on Windows, but you guys basically... Apple keeps saying, and I remember the commercials, I'm a PC, I'm a Mac, and they'd be like, oh, well, the PC gets sick. Well, if you have a Mac, you never get sick. It is a lie. You guys are targeted every single year with malware. We see infected Macs all the time in my day job. Make sure you have a good antivirus and good threat awareness. Just because it's a Mac doesn't mean it's immune. We can infect those, and we do when we are testing defenses for companies. You are not off the hook. And finally, let's talk about your own personal data breach thanks to Google. And here's what's going on. Last week, a law firm filed a class action suit against Google for allegedly breaking its promise of not selling your data. The lawsuit centers around Google's so-called use of real-time bidding, where companies can place bids to win advertising space in people's web browsing sessions. As part of that, companies obtain sensitive information about the users, about you, and even if they don't win or even intend to win, basically, they still get this information according to the suit. And to quote, plaintiffs bring this class action on behalf of themselves and all Google account holders in the United States who personal information was sold or otherwise disclosed by Google without their authorization. Now, the suit opens up with a screenshot of a Google site which reads, quote, "We do not sell your personal information to anyone." And then the lawsuit continues, Google breaks these promises billions of times every day. Now, the suit says that its plaintiffs engaged Professor Crystal Wilson, an associate professor at Northeastern University's Corey College of Computer Sciences, to help determine which entities received Google real-time bidding data. End quote. Professor Wilson identified 1.3 million separate publishers participating in Google Ads systems. Each of those publishers is a potential recipient of Google's RTB, or real-time bidding, bitstream data, including the personal information Google tells account holders it will not share. Now, the lawsuit also points out to a letter of the office of Senator Ron Wyden. I'm a big fan of that guy. I've heard Senator Wyden's name. He's a Democrat, I believe it was out of Oregon. He's been on the forefront of data privacy, so I'm a big fan. But it also points to a letter from Senator Ron Wyden to the FTC, or Federal Trade Commission, last July, and to quote, "Few Americans realize that companies are siphoning off and storing that bidstream data to compile exhaustive dossiers about them. These dossiers include their web browsing, location, and other data, which are then sold by data brokers to hedge funds, political campaigns, and even to the government without court orders." Now, Ventel is a contractor that sources location data and then sells that to government agencies such as Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, Customs and Border Protection, and others. In October, Motherboard by Vice reported that the CBP, the Customs and Border Protection, refused to tell Congress its legal reasoning for tracking Americans without a warrant with the data it bought from Ventel, which apparently got it from Google. As part of that report, an aide for Senator Wyden said that basically the Customs and Border Protection officials believe that the Ventel data is sourced from software development kits, basically that's bundled code included in ordinary apps, as well as the bidstream data from Google. Now, Bleichmar, Fonte, and Ald LLP, which is the firm behind this class action lawsuit, has previously won settlements in the tens of hundreds of millions of dollars in this vein. Google did not immediately respond to requests for comment to Vice, and Leslie Weaver from Bleichmar, Fonte, and Ald LLP, who was listed on the case, also declined to comment beyond the contents of the lawsuit. Typical lawyer move. But there you go. Google is basically getting you sold because they're selling that information to bidders, and then that information is then being turned around and being sold to basically other parties and ecosystems. And so Google has basically a middleman as a data broker, and they're making an absolute ton of money, as are the companies that are reselling the data, and that is your data. You use Google. If you have an Android phone, you've got a Gmail account. You probably have a Gmail account in general because pretty much everybody does. We're all part of this. They're breaching all of us. And so those were your breaches of the week. Were you affected? let me know. And this was the longest Breaches of the Week video ever. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.